Imagine a calm evening under a vast, starlit sky. In the stillness, we find Noah, a man standing in prayer and reflection, alone with his thoughts and the weight of a divine command. God has called him to build an ark, to prepare for a promise he cannot see. Around him the world carries on, unaware of the purpose that drives each strike of his hammer. For Noah, this calling is a path of faith that demands courage, patience, and a willingness to trust without question. Noah's story is one of remarkable perseverance. Year after year, he labors in silence, listening only to the memory of God's instruction, enduring the doubts and scorn of those around him. But Noah's heart remains steadfast, committed to the God who called him, even when that call seems shrouded in mystery. Through this journey, Noah's life becomes a testament to obedience and faith that speaks across generations, inviting us to consider what it means to hold on to God's promises, even in the absence of immediate answers. As we step into the story of Noah, we're reminded of our own journeys of faith, the seasons of waiting, the call to believe in something greater than ourselves. This is a story not only of survival, but of purpose, hope, and divine promise. May Noah's journey inspire us to trust that even in the silence, God is faithful and that his promises, though they may seem delayed, are never broken. Imagine a quiet night under a starlit sky, a man in silent prayer, surrounded only by the soft sound of the wind and the glimmer of stars. It is here, amid the stillness, that God speaks to Noah, entrusting him with a task few could comprehend: to build a massive ark, a wooden fortress destined to save creation. Amid the vastness of this calling and the simplicity of daily life, Noah receives this divine whisper, a heavenly message that echoes in his heart, altering the course of his life forever. Noah, a man of faith in a time when wickedness seemed to prevail, hears this voice with awe and reverence. How would you react to such a monumental mission? For Noah, the path was clear, yet fraught with uncertainties. In a world showing no signs of rain, he begins work on the ark, relying solely on God's promise and the faith within his heart. God's silence was not an absence, but a test for Noah's obedient spirit, and with every strike of his hammer, Noah responded faithfully. In the days that follow, Noah likely wrestles with silent doubts. Who could be entirely certain when undertaking something that seemed impossible? Yet he clings to that unseen promise. Often, the greatest spiritual breakthroughs come when we can't see the end, but choose to keep moving forward, just as Noah did. To Noah, God's silence wasn't a reason to stop, but an opportunity to demonstrate faith that doesn't require visible rewards. Every board he cut, every nail he hammered, was a statement of his trust in the unseen. Have you ever felt a calling that seemed greater than anything you could imagine? This is the kind of calling that demands a faithful response, even when the signs aren't clear. Looking at Noah's story, we see a powerful example of unwavering obedience. He didn't ask why, but rather, how can I serve? What a profound example for us. Perhaps God's silence in our lives is also an invitation to step out in faith, even without all the answers. As Noah continues his work, we can imagine his growing devotion, feeling closer to God with each step. And so, he keeps building, securing each piece with patience and faith, not knowing when the flood would come, but knowing he was answering a divine call. Picture Noah standing before the framework of his ark, a massive wooden structure taking shape in the dry land around him. Day by day he builds, his hands worn and his body weary, yet the skies remain clear. No sign of rain, no dark clouds, just an endless stretch of blue overhead. For most people, this would be a reason to doubt. But Noah holds to a faith that doesn't rely on what can be seen, but on the promises God has spoken. Imagine the months rolling into years, the years rolling into decades. How long would you have waited without a single drop of rain? For Noah, each day of building was a testament to his trust in God's timing, not his own understanding. With every board added to the ark, he demonstrated a faith that stood the test of time. This wasn't a short wait. It was a lifetime's commitment to a promise he believed with every fiber of his being. Through all those years, Noah's neighbors surely questioned his sanity. They mocked, perhaps even tried to reason with him, asking him to abandon his foolish work. But Noah kept his eyes on God, not on the opinions around him. Sometimes, the path of obedience can seem strange to others. Have you ever experienced a similar season, where your faith calls you forward, even when logic says otherwise? For Noah, faith meant moving forward despite the silence. The absence of rain didn't mean the absence of God. Rather, it strengthened his resolve to trust in what was promised, not in what was visible. It's a reminder to all of us that faith is often unseen, yet it carries us through the longest of waits, even when the outcome seems distant. Every morning, as Noah lifted his tools, he chose faith over sight. It's one thing to wait for a season, but to wait an entire lifetime without seeing immediate proof, that requires a kind of endurance many of us might struggle to find. Noah's wait reminds us that God's timing is perfect, even when it stretches our patience and challenges our understanding. With each year that passed, Noah grew closer to God, discovering a depth of faith only found in the longest journeys. He wasn't just building an ark, he was building a legacy of faith that would resonate through generations. He shows us that faith isn't about the momentary, but about trusting God's timing, no matter how long it takes. Imagine the weight Noah must have felt each time he lifted his tools, knowing the task before him would take decades, perhaps even a lifetime. Building an ark, gathering supplies, and preparing for a flood he couldn't yet see, all in response to a single command from God. Every step of obedience was a step away from doubt, a choice to believe in something greater than what he could see or understand. Obedience, after all, often means acting without complete clarity, trusting that God's ways are higher than our own. For Noah, every day was a choice between surrendering to doubt or stepping out in faith. He must have faced moments where doubt whispered, "Why are you doing this? Nothing has changed." But Noah kept moving forward, his actions speaking louder than the doubts within. In our lives, we may also face tasks that seem overwhelming, or seasons when obedience feels like a burden. Have you ever experienced a time when you felt the weight of obedience, unsure of what was ahead? The act of obeying without immediate reward is one of the hardest parts of faith. Many of us prefer assurance, a sign, or even a small glimpse of what's to come. Yet, Noah's story reminds us that true obedience means trusting the one who calls us, not waiting for visible results. In those years of building, his obedience became a quiet strength, one that grew with each nail hammered and each plank laid. For Noah, this wasn't just a task, it was a refining of his spirit. With every day of labor, he grew closer to God, learning the depths of surrender and the courage of faith. His story reminds us that obedience isn't just about the end result, it's about the journey of trust we build along the way. It's about allowing our hearts to be molded and our faith strengthened. So many times we wait for reassurance, hoping for confirmation that we're on the right path. But Noah's journey shows us that the weight of obedience often comes without the comfort of certainty. Have you ever found yourself questioning if you're doing the right thing? Sometimes the only confirmation we need is knowing that God called us to it, even if others around us can't see the reason. As Noah continued his work, he became a living testament to the power of obedience. His faith wasn't in what he could see, but in the God who had given him the command. And as he labored on, his heart grew steady, his spirit resilient, preparing him not just for the rain, but for a life that would echo as an example of trust and surrender. If this story of obedience resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. How has faith guided your own journey through moments of doubt? Or simply comment the word faith to let us know you're with us on this spiritual walk. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of trust and perseverance. Imagine Noah day after day, working on his ark under the open sky, hammering and building, while people around him shook their heads in disbelief. Laughter, mocking voices, and disapproving stares filled the air. For many, the sight of Noah's massive ark made no sense. Why build a boat when there was no sign of rain? Yet Noah continued, steady and undeterred, listening only to the call of God, even as the world questioned his sanity. The world's scorn can be a powerful force. It tries to shake our resolve, make us doubt our own path, and test the strength of our faith. Noah surely heard the taunts, saw the ridicule, and felt the weight of every doubting word. But he chose to keep his focus on God's promise, not on the voices around him. Have you ever faced criticism for following what you believed was right? Like Noah, we too can choose to hold fast to our convictions, even when they are met with misunderstanding. As the years passed, the mocking likely intensified. People must have grown more confident in their disbelief, seeing the clear skies and dry land. "Why waste your time, Noah?" they might have said. But Noah's heart remained fixed on a reality they couldn't see. Faith isn't about conforming to what the world understands, but about trusting the unseen. Noah's example reminds us that sometimes obedience to God will set us apart, even make us seem foolish in the world's eyes. Each day, Noah's steadfastness spoke louder than the jeers around him. His actions became a silent testimony to the power of unwavering faith. His life showed that true faith doesn't require validation from others, but finds its confidence in God alone. How often do we let others' opinions affect our own steps? Noah's story encourages us to turn down the volume of the world's voices and tune into God's whispers. The mockery he endured wasn't just a trial, it was a refining fire for his faith. Through it, he learned resilience, discovering a strength that only comes when faith is tested. We too may encounter seasons when others question or belittle our beliefs. In those moments, Noah's story offers a reminder that true strength is found not in the approval of others, but in the certainty of God's promise. With each year that passed, Noah's unshakable faith made his obedience shine all the brighter. He became a beacon of hope, a living example of someone willing to stand alone if that's what obedience required. His story calls us to stand firm in our convictions, even when the world around us doesn't understand. Imagine the stillness Noah must have felt as he worked year after year with no further instructions, no additional words from God, just silence. Day after day, he built the ark, listening only to the echo of God's original command. Many would have faltered, wondering if God had forgotten them or if they had misunderstood his message. But Noah held on, pressing forward with unshakable faith. How would we respond in a season of silence when God seems quiet? Noah's journey teaches us that God's silence doesn't mean he isn't present. In fact, silence often deepens our faith, drawing us closer to him in ways words cannot. When we don't hear him, we're invited to lean on his promises even more. Noah didn't need constant reminders. He trusted the command he'd received and let his faith carry him through. Have you ever felt distant from God, like you were waiting for a word that didn't come? Noah's story reminds us that silence can be a time of growth. In those long, silent years, Noah's work became an act of worship, a declaration of trust. Each board he placed, each nail he hammered, was a testament to his belief in a God who was still guiding him, even if he couldn't hear him. Silence can be a test of endurance, but it also refines our faith, showing us that God is near, even when he's not speaking. Through the silence, Noah learned the beauty of trusting in what had already been spoken. Faith doesn't always need constant affirmation. Sometimes it simply needs to remember. When God seems quiet, perhaps he is calling us to remember his past faithfulness, to trust that he has not forgotten. Noah's example shows us that we don't need to hear God every day to follow him faithfully. Noah's steadfastness reminds us that faith is about more than feelings or signs. It's about the commitment to trust God's character. Silence for Noah became the canvas on which he painted his unwavering faith. In our own lives, we may face times when God's voice feels distant. Yet Noah's story shows us that true faith presses on even in the quietest moments. So Noah continued year after year, knowing that silence didn't mean abandonment. His resilience was forged in the quiet, his faith growing deeper with every passing day. And in that silence, he found strength, knowing that God was with him, guiding him even when he didn't speak. Imagine Noah and his family gathered together after a long day's work, sitting under the evening sky, looking over the growing ark. Building this massive structure was not just Noah's task alone. His family stood by him, each member contributing in their own way, united by faith in a vision others couldn't see. They had each other, a close-knit circle of trust and belief, bound together by a calling that went beyond themselves. How powerful it must have been to work alongside those who shared his faith, even when the world didn't understand. For Noah's family, supporting him wasn't just a matter of helping build the ark, it was an act of shared faith. They faced the same mockery, the same doubts from neighbors, and yet they stood firm, finding strength in their unity. Their story reminds us that we are never truly alone when we have those who believe with us. Have you ever felt the strength that comes from those who stand by you, even in uncertain times? Each family member played a vital role, perhaps some gathering materials, others preparing food, and still others encouraging each other to keep going. Their efforts weren't only physical but deeply spiritual, a commitment to the unseen promise God had given them. They shared a faith that wasn't just Noah's, but became their own. Noah's family shows us that faith is often strengthened in community, through those who walk beside us. Noah's wife, his sons, and their wives all chose to believe in the unseen, placing their trust in God's words through Noah. They might have had moments of doubt, wondering why this task was worth the cost, yet they chose to trust together. In life, there is strength in unity, especially in families who believe together. Noah's family offers us an example of how faith can bind us, creating a support system that weathers any storm. This shared faith likely gave Noah the courage he needed, knowing that his family believed in him, trusted his calling, and stood with him. When we walk with those who believe as we do, our steps feel lighter, our burdens shared. Noah's family shows us the power of a united household in God's purpose, a bond that becomes a shelter amid life's uncertainties. As they worked side by side, they were not only building an ark, they were building a legacy of faith, an unbreakable bond grounded in obedience to God. Together, they remind us that faith doesn't have to be a solitary journey. Sometimes it's a family endeavor, each person adding strength to the other, building something far greater than they could alone. Picture Noah working tirelessly on the ark, day after day, as he searches the sky for any sign that the promised rain might come. Perhaps he noticed small shifts in the wind or clouds that seemed to gather only to drift away again. These subtle signs may not have seemed like much, but they likely served as small reminders of God's promise, glimmers of hope that encouraged him to keep going. Even in the longest seasons of waiting, God sometimes gives us these glimpses to remind us that He has not forgotten. For Noah, these moments must have been like water for a thirsty soul, small assurances that kept his heart steadfast. God didn't send the rain right away, but He sent reminders that the promise would be fulfilled. Do you ever feel like you're waiting for a sign, a reassurance that your faith isn't in vain? Sometimes God's signs come quietly, gently, just enough to remind us that He is still at work. In our lives, too, we may find these small glimpses, a friend's encouraging word, a moment of peace, or an unexpected blessing. These little signs can be God's way of showing us that He is with us, even when the full picture isn't clear. Noah's story teaches us to value these small reminders, to let them nourish our spirits and renew our strength. As Noah continued building, these hints of hope likely gave him renewed energy, fueling his determination. It's a reminder that God's timing is perfect, even when it stretches our patience. Those small moments of reassurance serve as markers on our path, guiding us forward and reminding us that God's promises are sure. Hope isn't always about immediate fulfillment. Sometimes it's about holding on, believing that God will act when the time is right. Noah's steadfastness in the face of a long wait shows us that true faith is patient, willing to endure, and strengthened by every small sign of God's presence. With each day, Noah kept his eyes open for these glimpses, allowing them to feed his soul and strengthen his resolve. And in those moments, he wasn't just waiting for rain, he was growing in faith, preparing his heart to receive the promise when it finally came. Imagine the moment when the skies finally darkened and the air grew heavy with the scent of rain. After years of clear skies and endless waiting, the first drops began to fall. For Noah and his family, each drop was a vindication, a testament that their faith and perseverance had not been in vain. The heavens opened, and with it came the fulfillment of God's promise. Imagine the awe, the solemn joy that must have filled their hearts as they watched God's word come alive before their eyes. This was the moment when Noah's long obedience was rewarded, a moment of both relief and reverence. For years, the world had doubted him, had laughed at his faith and questioned his sanity. But now, as the rain poured down, the truth of God's promise was undeniable. In our lives too, we may wait long for God's promises, and when they finally come, they fill us with a joy that words can hardly describe. Have you ever experienced a moment when faith was finally rewarded? As the rain continued to fall, Noah's family gathered inside the ark, each drop a reminder of God's faithfulness. Every moment of their labor, every mocking word they had endured, now held a purpose. God's timing, though it had stretched their patience, was perfect. This moment shows us that faith isn't just about the waiting, it's about trusting that the wait will be worth it, that God's promises will come to pass. For those who had mocked Noah, the rain was a reminder of the warnings they had ignored. But for Noah and his family, it was a moment of divine fulfillment. Sometimes, when we hold on to faith against all odds, we experience a deeper understanding of God's power and timing. Noah's journey reminds us that God's promises are always worth the wait, even if they come when we least expect them. As the ark floated on the waters, Noah must have felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that his faith had led him exactly where he needed to be. The rain may have been fierce, but within the ark there was a calm assurance, a sense that they were safe in God's hands. This is the kind of peace that comes only from trusting in God's faithfulness, even when we don't understand His timing. And so, as the waters rose, Noah's faith was finally rewarded, his trust vindicated. It was not just a moment of survival, but a moment of triumph, a testimony that God's promises never fail. For us, Noah's story reminds us that even in the longest seasons of waiting, God is working, preparing to fulfill His word in His perfect time. Imagine the ark coming to rest on dry ground, the waters receding, and a quiet peace settling over the earth. After the tumult of the storm, Noah and his family step out, taking their first steps on the renewed earth, surrounded by a landscape transformed. It was a moment filled with awe and reverence, a chance to start anew, guided by God's faithfulness. Noah's journey, marked by faith and endurance, had led him here to a world cleansed and ready for a fresh beginning. For Noah, this new beginning wasn't just a physical one, it was deeply spiritual. The flood was over, but his faith remained. In stepping out, he showed that his trust in God went beyond the ark and the rain. It extended into the future, where God's promises were his foundation. Sometimes, when we come through a storm, it's easy to forget the faith that carried us. But Noah shows us that faith is a constant companion, one that grows stronger in times of renewal. As Noah gazed upon the world, he likely felt a sense of gratitude and wonder. God had brought him through the darkest days, and now he stood in the light of a new day. Every challenge, every moment of doubt had shaped his faith, preparing him for this new chapter. His story reminds us to pause and acknowledge God's guidance when we come through a difficult season. Have you ever felt a renewed faith after a time of trial? With the flood behind him, Noah offered a sacrifice to God, a symbol of his gratitude and continued trust. It was his way of honoring the one who had been faithful. We, too, can offer our own sacrifices of gratitude when we see God's hand at work in our lives. Noah's sacrifice reminds us that faith isn't only about asking for strength in trials. It's about remembering to give thanks when we reach the other side. The world around him was new, fresh with possibilities, and untouched by the past. For Noah, this was a powerful reminder that God's promises are for renewal, for life, and for hope. Each of us, in our own way, experiences moments when we get to start fresh, leaving behind old struggles. Noah's story encourages us to embrace these new beginnings with a heart full of faith. As Noah and his family began their new lives, they carried with them a faith that had been tested and proven. In every challenge they would face from that point on, they could look back and remember God's faithfulness. This renewal wasn't just about surviving the flood, it was about thriving in the promises of God, confident in the one who had carried them through. Picture Noah and his family looking up at the sky, now clear and bright after the storm, when a beautiful rainbow appears, stretching across the heavens. In this moment, God makes a covenant with Noah, a promise that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. This rainbow, brilliant and breathtaking, was a symbol of hope and divine faithfulness, a reminder that God's promises are enduring and true. For Noah, it was a final, tangible sign of God's commitment, one that would be seen by all generations to come. The rainbow wasn't just for Noah, it was for all of humanity, a promise that extended beyond him and his family, reaching through the ages to us today. Every time we see a rainbow, we are reminded of God's unchanging character, his mercy, and his dedication to his people. Have you ever looked at a rainbow and felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that it's a symbol of a promise that still stands? For Noah, this covenant must have filled him with a profound sense of purpose, knowing that his journey and obedience were part of a much larger story. Sometimes we may feel small, wondering if our own faith matters in the grand scheme of things. But Noah's story reminds us that our faith, no matter how humble, can have a lasting impact, rippling through generations. As Noah gazed upon the rainbow, he must have felt a renewal of hope, a reminder that God's plans are not just about survival, but about life, growth, and purpose. This promise wasn't just a safeguard against disaster. It was an invitation to live with faith in God's promises. In our own lives, God's promises serve as an anchor, giving us hope and courage as we face life's uncertainties. The rainbow became a sign not only of protection, but of a deep, enduring relationship between God and humanity. It speaks of a God who is not only powerful but also compassionate, who cares for his creation and seeks to renew it continually. Noah's story invites us to see the rainbow as more than a natural wonder, as a living symbol of God's faithfulness to us. And so, Noah's journey concludes not with the end of a storm, but with a new beginning, a fresh start under the light of God's promises. This covenant marked the start of a new chapter for all creation, a bond between God and his people that endures to this day. As we look upon the rainbow, we are invited to remember and to renew our own faith, holding fast to the promises of the one who is always faithful. As Noah's journey came to a close, he stepped onto dry ground, surrounded by a world renewed and a sky bright with a rainbow, God's covenant, a promise that his faithfulness would endure through all generations. This journey, filled with patience, obedience, and a faith that defied all logic, was a testament to what it means to trust in God's timing and his promises, even when they seem distant. Noah's life reminds us that our own seasons of waiting and perseverance hold purpose, shaping us to be more steadfast in our faith. Noah's story challenges us to live with that same trust, believing that even when the path feels uncertain, God's plan is still unfolding. His legacy is a call to stand firm in our own faith, to listen for God's voice amid the noise, and to remember that every promise He gives will come to pass. Each time we see a rainbow, we are invited to renew our own faith, to remember that God's covenant with Noah is also a promise to us, that we are seen, loved, and guided by a faithful Creator. As you reflect on Noah's journey, may his story inspire you to deepen your own faith, to hold on to hope in every season, and to trust that God's promises, though they may take time, are always fulfilled. If this message has touched your heart, share it with others who might need encouragement on their journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that uplift and strengthen your spirit. May you walk forward with the assurance that, like Noah, you are never alone on this path of faith.